Let me finish. I think with regard to how Donald Trump did, by a show of hands, how many people remember what share of the vote Mitt Romney got? Anyone? Any political science here? 47%. What share of the vote did Donald Trump get? 46%, correct. So we can sit here and try to. I just think that with regard,
But she did lose Florida, which was the example.
Right, and she lost key states where she needed to win, and she knew that, and that's the system. So with regard to what it was, I think it could be more likely all of the above than one of the above. But it's also a failure of the Democrats, and it's also a big sign about where the political system is. Different ballgame.
But well, hold on. Oh, I'm not. Whether the birther issue is what got this party started, and it did, President Trump did get a lot of votes. And
we needed Jay-Z and Beyonce to get that crowd.
And I love them.
Which is a point that Trump made, by the way.
Well, I would argue we all need Jay-Z and Beyonce.
I'm sorry, Jacob, did you want to jump in?
I just want to say on your question, Ari's right. As Linda Richmond would have said on Coffee
Richmond and had your nails done
Coffee
and a
Talk.
sweater.
A
Would you have
peanut.
taken that meeting with you?
Yeah, I don't know, definitely not.
Let's go to another question. Go ahead.
Hey, guys. Last one.
Who wants to take that first?
Well, I mean, were any of you guys at the Women's March? I went to the one out in L.A., and those people were not paid. You know, I mean, were any of you at the Women's March? Yeah. Were any of you paid? Okay, I rest my case.
Casey, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, on the rally question, I do think it's one of the things we've watched President Trump try to navigate is the transition for any politician. The job of the presidency is such that into that office. So we've kind of watched him try to make that transition from campaigner to. So he doesn't have moments like that at rallies, right? I mean, he's much more natural. I remember that press conference he had. I don't know if you remember that. It was a little bit like, it felt like watching a crashing train in real time.
The tax returns one? Or?
No, after
long.
It was the first one after.
When Peter Alexander got up and asked him about the Electoral College.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. It kind of came on in the middle of the day, and we were all riveted for like a full hour and a half to the televisions. That was another example, I think, of a place where
They energize his supporters, but they're also his lane because in that format, you don't have to follow up with policy.
Who comes in and who comes out at those rallies, because those are, I think, right, they're campaign events? Yeah, so technically, I don't think they're.
So it's mostly people who show up who really want to see him. It's also I mean, Washington is still a really unfriendly place for President Trump. He may Republicans may control both houses of Congress, but if you talk to Republican members of Congress behind the scenes, they may publicly bite their tongues and not want to say anything about the president, but privately, I think a lot of them still have no idea what to do every day.
When he calls everyone losers. You kind of lead with like.
But they didn't want him to be the nominee either.
That's true.
I would submit that that's what his support.
But I think it helps explain why. Okay, he's going to go out, leave Washington, go back to these rallies where there are people who are happy to hear from him because he's not getting it every day in D.C.
All right, let's take one more. Go ahead.
Hi. So one of the more puzzling questions.
President Trump is not used to accountability. Whether or not he's been in government or not, he's never worked. There was a brief time when the Trump Corporation was public, and
Through Ari, at the end of the day, I mean, a lot of these questions is what the administration trying to do legal? I mean, is that fair? Is that fair to say?
I mean, I think they're talking about two things. One is how much deference do you give a given source? And we give a certain
things like President Trump, in terms of the jobs number, can talk up the importance of it and can talk down the importance, depending on if it suits him. But there are other things like, is China a currency manipulator? President Trump one wasn't Ivanka had just met with this one and that one and got a trademark. I mean, all those things are too cute and too close, and we don't.
I think you're right, Sopan, that, I mean, look, covering this administration is unlike covering anything I've ever encountered. I've been covering Washington
To what Jacob talked about, sort of the fact-free campaign, President Trump put forth.
I think is that in this case, there are outside consequences. What happened in the era that you're talking about?
One last question. Sorry, right there.
So I remember following Romney's presidential campaign.
Romney has to be legitimately sad. If you think about
So bummed right now. If you're Mitt Romney, are you so bummed?
Mitt Romney getting crushed for his career, and the truth is, within careers in the financial industry, private equity makes you most well suited.
Don't forget, Mitt Romney.
Been about who is the most interesting person that captures people's imagination and attention, and it can explain even when we've had differentials in the popular vote. I mean, everybody may have an opinion about George W. Bush. I don't know how many of us would argue that Al Gore was more charismatic than George W. Bush. I mean, that's a little bit of a little bit of a difficult argument to make. But if you can go pretty far back in history and look at that as
I think part of the premise of your question is, what is the press's role in social change and accountability? Society, which can be governmental, which can be prosecutorial, which can be capitalistic, make decisions. So there's always what he's known for, but that gave him extra abilities to counter, to punch, to control, to drive. So he's certainly effective at that, but that doesn't in any way remove the role of everyone in this room and anyone watching at home. And
Casey, did you want to jump in there?
I was just going to kind of follow up on that point. The other thing, and to what you said about Mitt Romney.
I mean, you can find me in the streets because the streets is watching. But when I'm not in the streets, at Ari Melber, ARIMELBER, on Instagram or Twitter.
Casey?
I'm only in New York because Congress is on recess. You can normally find me in the basement of the Capitol running around somewhere. You can also find me on Twitter at Casey. My name is spelled Kasie. It is not pronounced Cassie.
You can find me in my hometown of Los Angeles, California, where I'm. Listen, I got high anxiety. Look at me. I'm stressed. And you can find me on social anywhere. Just Google me.